Hi, this is my microteaching lesson 2. There's some basics before I start the microteaching. This is a 9th grade English class, and our standard is to be able to make oral presentations for a variety of purposes. I just want to say there's some subpoints to the standard which I didn't include because it's too much, but it pretty much covers everything in the standard. This is just the start of a project. We would cover this project over the course of a week or a week and a half, depending on how much time the students needed. And over that week, we would go over more details of the project. So I might spend a day focusing more on the outline for the project, or another day talking about, how they can set up their slides to look nice, or another day going more in depth on sources. So this is just like the tip of the iceberg. We use home scaffolding. And just some of the technology that we're using in this class. This is more of a class where the students use the technology, but they're using presentation technology, and they're also learning how to research with the computer. And those are some very valuable skills. Okay, so let's start our micro-teaching. Our objective today is to create and present a 10 to 15 minute research-based presentation with an accompanying Google slide or PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so this sounds really big, but don't worry about it. Let's get to some of the details of this presentation. It's going to be about 10 to 15 minutes long. 10 is the medium, 15 is the maximum. We don't really want you guys to go too much longer because then we don't have enough time for the whole class, but too short and you're not going to get in as depth as they want. Right, you have to quote at least 3 credible sources with MLA formatting. And again, this is a minimum. You can go over. More sources might be necessary to really go in depth on your topic. Because I think it can be on any topic you want. So you can do it on your favorite animal. You can do a topic on maybe something that's not as typically academic. So you can do something on like your favorite food or a hairstyle that you like. What's the history of the ponytail or something like that. You can do a topic on anything you like in a class. So if you really like history class and you want to do a presentation on the Battle of the Bulge, you can do that. Right? It's open to anything you want. But you must use some sort of electronic presentation, so like Google Slides or PowerPoint. If you want to try Prezi, go for it. And it has to be between 5 and 20 slides. Okay, so what's the deal with that? So how long would you be spending per slides if it's 5 slides? You'd be spending 2 minutes per slide. I'm about 20 slides. That's 30 seconds per slide, right? So it depends on how much you put on the slide, right, and how how your presentation is geared. But I want you to have, you're not gonna talk for 3 minutes on one slide, and you're not gonna talk for 15 seconds on the slide, right? I want you to actually focus on your material. And so 5 to 20 slides. That's pretty generous. It's a pretty wide range. You should be good. So what is a presentation? Okay, so don't worry, because this is actually going to be really similar to other projects you've done. So here's a little heads up. Presentations are just verbal essays. There's actually many kinds of verbal essays. All right, think of a sermon. What happens when you go to church and hear a sermon? And the preacher starts, then he usually, says his main point within like the first 5 minutes of the sermon, right? And sometimes they even pray after that first 5 minutes, and that's when you know it's going to be a really long sermon, when you've already been sitting there a while and then they just pray, right? That's when you know you're in trouble. Well, that's their introduction, and then they usually support that with various points from scripture and maybe some stories with spiritual impact, right? Those are their main points and their subpoints. And then they wrap it up in a conclusion. So basically, every Sabbath, what you're hearing is a verbal essay. What about sales presentations? You go to maybe Ulta Beauty, or I don't know if you've ever had to accompany your parents to a car dealership. What do the salespeople sound like? Well, they bring up the topic of what they're trying to sell you, right? Whether it's a tube of lipstick or a truck, and they bring it up, and then they start telling you point by point all the things that are good about it. Then they wrap it up on why you should buy it, right? They might include stories, right? They might include special deals and all sorts of stuff. All right, so guess what? That salesperson is giving you a verbal essay. So presentations are no different. These are just verbal essays. And while this is going to include lots of public speaking, it's going to have significantly less writing than a written essay. So don't worry about it. It's actually not going to be a horrible amount of work. So your basic format, again, you're going to have an introduction, you're going to have your little thesis statement, the little thing you're going to talk about, and you're going to start listing your main points, and you have subpoints for each of those. You have, evidence to back it up. And you're going to have, probably for this project, I'd say anywhere from 3 to 5 main points, my guess. It depends on how in depth you want to go. And you're going to wrap that up with a conclusion. Right, so the other thing is I said you need 3 credible sources, right? So those include things like peer review articles, although beware, those are usually written for people who have gone through graduate school. So the vocabulary level and like the whole, just like the reading level that those require might be a little bit ahead of you 9th graders, okay? And plus those sometimes you have to pay to access them. So while you can't find those on Google Scholar and academic libraries, I'd be careful. Maybe the university has posted something else on like their university website that will be more accessible, and it's still, because it's coming from that university, it still has that weight of credibility. See, what a credible source means is that it's written by like an expert in the field or someone that we can trust, someone that we know isn't lying. When you're on social media and someone in the comments section makes a claim, you have no idea if they're lying or not. You have no idea what credentials they have. You have basically no way to prove that what they say is right. People from these sources usually are answerable to some higher, well, they're usually answerable to like a committee or other scholars or experts for their information. So we have, some belief that it can be true. They may have studied the topic for a long time. So that's why like peered articles in universities are very good. That's also why like associations that specialize in the topic are good, because they're pulling from experts, right? So the American Heart Association would be something you could check out if you're doing a topic on heart disease, right? Because their information is supposed to come from doctors, right? So they're supposed to, be credible people who are experts in the disorder. The Department of Natural Resources is an example of how like a government site might be good. So let's say you're doing a project on erosion on like Michigan coastlines, or you're doing a project on gray squirrels, right? The DNR would have probably pages on that, and they would, again, they're pulling from experts, so they'd have accurate information. Company websites might be accurate for certain things regarding their company. So if you were doing a project on the Ford F-150, you could go to like the Ford website and they could tell you accurate information about, like the gas mileage it's supposed to get, or like what colors it comes in and stuff like that, right? So another source would be reputable magazines and newspapers. They're they make money because they're supposed to be accurate sources. So if you're studying current events, that's really a good source. So like let's say you're doing the war in the Ukraine, some of the sources, like they haven't had time for historians to look into that. So you might have to go to like newspapers to get accurate sources on that. Last but not least are primary sources from trustworthy people. So these are people who have memory of events or have experience or expertise in an area. You can just go talk to the people themselves. So again, if you were doing a subject on heart disease and your uncle's a cardiologist, go talk to your uncle, right? He knows what he's talking about. Or if your grandpa fought in the Vietnam War and you're doing a project on that, go talk to him, right? And picking a topic, we don't want to pick something that's too narrow and you won't be able to find information on. So like the diet of Winston Churchill might be a little bit narrow. You could do foods that were common during World War II. That might be better. That might be wide enough. But if you're like specifically looking for the diet of Winston Churchill, you're not going to find enough information to talk about for 10 minutes unless you're going way too deep into like something that would get you a PhD, and you do not have the time for that for this project. So wait until you're in college for that one. Also, don't pick anything that's too broad that you're not going to be able to cover in a meaningful way in 10 minutes. So you can't cover all of World War II. It's too much. Focus on a single battle or a historical figure from the war. So then you could do it on like the Battle of the Bulge or Winston Churchill, right? That would be more appropriate. Right, so for today's assignment, Take 5 minutes to free write as many topic ideas as you can. Just like blurt them out on the piece of paper, write them as fast as you can. You don't have to turn it in, so don't worry about how it looks. And then take 5 minutes to pick your 3 favorites, talk to your friends about it. And whenever you're done with that, start doing a little bit of preliminary research to see if you can find any sources on your topic. And by next class, I want a final topic pick and 3 sources that you can use. You don't have to use those in the final project. I just want to know that like sources are available for you to use. Okay? That's it. Okay, let's get to work. Bye.